Hello, I'm Christian, and welcome to the Jamoir Leadership Podcast, a show where we talk about effective collaboration, influence, and leadership in an increasingly complex world. My interview partner is Dr. Dirk Schlimm. Dirk is an international leadership expert and the author of Influencing Powerful People. The purpose of this podcast is to share ideas and stimulate discussion, and it does not constitute professional advice of any kind. If such advice is needed, the services of a competent professional should be sought. The speakers, host, and Jamoir International Incorporated are not to be held responsible for any use, misuse, or reuse of the content. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to the Jamoir Leadership Podcast. We're currently in a series on board leadership, so please make sure to check out our 2 previous episodes on the topic. Today, though, we want to talk about how one gets appointed to a board in the first place. Is it something that should interest you, or what is the process or even a strategy to secure a board appointment? To help us talk about this, we're excited to have a super special guest on the program. Richard Powers is a highly qualified expert on our topic today, and he is also a great friend. So let me introduce him briefly. Richard is the National Director of the ICD-Rotman Directors Education Program, DEP, which is jointly developed by the Institute of Corporate Directors and the University of Toronto's Rotman School of Management. The DEP is the leading national education program for experienced board directors in Canada, and it is offered at Canada's top business schools. Since the launch of the DEP, 7,300 directors have completed the program. In addition to his work with the DEP and other governance programs, Rick also teaches the Executive MBA, MBA, and Executive Education programs at Rotman School, and he is also a recipient of numerous teaching awards. He is a director of several not-for-profit organizations, and he frequently comments on legal and governance issues in various media across Canada. Welcome to the show, Rick.
Thanks very much, Christian. Happy to be here.
No, we're very glad to have you. And of course, before we dive into too quickly, I have to make sure we mention we also have Dirk, our regular leadership expert. Can't forget you, Dirk. How are you doing?
Yes, doing well. And it's a super special pleasure here, Rick, to have you on the show. We've worked together a lot in the DEP, and you're a fantastic director and teacher there. So it's super to have you on the show.
Well, thanks, Dirk. It's a good partnership. It's worked well for a number of years.
Okay, excellent. Super.
Wonderful. And Rick and Dirk, I know that you two know each other well and often are talking and doing stuff together. So Dirk, why don't I let you take the lead on this interview?
Yeah. Okay. So happy to jump in here. And first question, Rick, I'd like to start with is we're talking about corporate directors today, but how is the role of a corporate director different from the role of a manager or a senior executive in a company?
Dirk, I think if we're talking directorships and boards, I'm going to look at it from a governance model point of view because, there are different types of boards. I recall when I first started getting involved in governance, I sat on a couple of working boards where, we had small budgets, small head count, and the board director members, we had jobs that would normally be attributable to, operations people. But typically in a governance board, the main difference is that the staff or the CEO and their senior management team manage the organization, and the board oversees that function. And a couple of things happen when the board starts getting involved in operations. One, they undermine the authority of their CEO, and 2, they become responsible for those decisions. How can you hold the CEO and senior management team responsible when the board is getting involved in the mucky muck? So it's important that a board understands they have an oversight role. It does not mean that they don't get involved in operations sometimes. In fact, a good CEO will task certain board members or at least get their advice from them because they bring a certain degree of skill set to the board. You want to access those skill sets. So there is a sort of a give and take. But bottom line, board is governance, the CEO and management team is operations.
Yeah, Rick. Okay, that's a good distinction that we want to work with here. So it's a difference between the oversight of the company and the management side of the company, but also good to point out that sometimes directors do have to get their hands dirty, so to speak, and there are various reasons. Something could be a crisis, could be something that happens that will draw directors more into it. But typically, it's a difference between management and oversight. And so, having pointed out that fundamental distinction here, how do I know whether a director responsibility is for me? If at this stage in my career that's something I should be interested in, what would you point out as something people need to, the questions they need to ask themselves when they want to consider a board responsibility?
Well, it depends on what type of board, whether it's going to be in the not-for-profit sector, the Crown, public or private companies. In the not-for-profit sector, I think you have to have a passion for the cause. I get that question quite a bit, Dirk, actually. And that's the first, people say, well, I'd like to get on a board. Which one should I join? Well, I can't tell you that. First of all, you have to have a passion for the cause. If you don't, you won't last that long because it won't be that interesting to you. In the corporate world, I think if you have a passion for, business, first of all, obviously, this is a business position. But again, you have some sector experience or you have some skill sets that you would like to give back to the organization, whether in accounting skills or lawyer or HR skills. Everyone comes to the board with different types of skill sets. So a willingness to share your experience and your knowledge, the time, because it is a commitment of time. Years ago, people used to sit on, 7, 8, 9 boards. You can't do that today. It just takes too much time. Typically, a board member in a publicly traded company would be spending 300 to 400 hours a year. How many blocks of 300 or 400 hours do we have? So, and there are organizations now that monitor that. ISS, Institutional Shareholder Services, and Glass Lewis, for example, they monitor those. And if you're sitting on too many boards, they're going to suggest that shareholders vote against you because you're overboarded. You can't do the job in the time that you have available. So finding an organization that you have a passion for, finding an organization that you feel you have could add skill sets and some expertise to, and some time and interest in doing so are the main requirements. I think that you have to sit down. Do I have the time? Do I have the interest? What areas would I be interested in? And, I said, understand that it is a real commitment. This is not something that people do for a hobby.
Yeah, no, and Rick, I think that's an important point that I think I want to emphasize here one more time. It is a serious responsibility. It's not a hobby, so we have to know what we're getting ourselves into. And you also started to talk about how this has changed, right? How it is, I think, a more serious responsibility today than it would have been some years ago. But talking about that kind of change here, I think in the past the typical director is the former CEO. And I think there's still a lot of boards who are looking for that former CEO. But what are, and I think you mentioned it just now, there are other qualifications. Are there any hot skills right now, if I use that term, that boards are looking for? What's your view there?
Well, you're right. I sort of joke in the class that typically how was a director chosen? Well, the AGM was coming up and the chair looks down the table and says 4 words. Does anybody know anyone? And, we tend to know people who look a lot like us. And that really breaks down the idea of diversity as well. So when you talk about hot skills, let's be fair. The accounting, having a CPA or accounting designation is very popular, obviously, because you need someone to chair and work on the audit committee, which is one of the most important committees. Legal skills, sector experience. So if it's a mining company, some experience in the mining sector. If it's in, kind of retail, something like that, retail, computing skills, cyber, all those different skills are coming to the fore. But I think the other aspect that we really have to consider these days is diversity. And that's where we're making some headroads. So it's, certainly gender was the first aspect of diversity that we're looking at. I believe I have this right, but I think it was 47% of all director appointments to TSE or TSX listed companies last year were female, new director appointments. So we're almost at parity in the appointments. We're still not at parity on the boards. That'll take a while, but we've made, I think, significant gains on gender on boards, but there's other aspects of diversity that are still way behind, and we have some work to do there. So it's skill sets and diversity are very important today.
And Rick, I think we also see that firsthand, if you will, in the class makeup in the Directors Education Program. When I think about when we had our first class together 13 years ago, and we look at the class makeup today, I think we can see that change as well there. So that's interesting point here. Rick, let me change tack here just a little bit. What would make really, from your perspective, an effective director? Do you have some examples? You have been on boards where saying, yeah, this is a kind of person who is saying very effective, and then maybe here's something I've seen not so effective. So just a comment on that, if I could put you on the
Well, you're
spot.
right. I've seen both. Absolutely. The most effective directors are ones that prepare. You have to come to the meeting prepared. You can always tell when someone comes and you can't see the, little, when you turn over the page, little corners, that page hasn't been turned. So they're sitting there with a brand new, fresh book or whatever. That's changed a little bit, obviously, because a lot of the materials are delivered online today. But preparation is critical, and doing the homework so that you come to the meeting prepared. Depending on whether you're a chair of a committee, I think it's very important to have obviously good communication skills, but excellent listening skills. And that's where some directors, I think, go off the boil a little bit. They feel they have to speak on everything. You can't be an expert on everything. So oftentimes they're just repeating something that somebody else has said in another way. I talk that we're all in violent agreement here, so listening, choosing where you can add value, and really coming prepared to the meetings to discuss the issues that are on the agenda. Also, recognizing where you have conflicts and being prepared to put up your hand and say, hey, something, understand that this is an important issue, but I have a conflict, or I feel there'd be a perception of a conflict here, and I should step away for this particular issue. So understanding your role, being prepared, and active listening skills so that you can add value where appropriate and not just repeat what other people are saying.
Yeah, and Rick, I would say, as I listen to your talk here, and I think about even management teams, I think this is very good advice for any senior team. But it's good to hear it's especially important on a board. And so if sorry, you wanted to?
No, Dirk, I was just going to say that typically a board is 9 to 12, maybe a couple more, maybe a couple less, but the average is sort of 9 to 12. You've got 9 to 12 people that really, are there because of the skill sets that they're bringing. A good chair wants to bring those, to give everyone an opportunity to converse with the others. So again, the thing that bothers me is where a chair lets someone dominate the discussions over and over again, and we don't have an opportunity to hear from others on the board. So again, the chair plays a very pivotal role here in calming down those more excitable board members and making sure that everyone has an opportunity to converse and give their opinion. And where a director is reticent to do that, it's up to the chair to bring that, bring their opinions to the fore, because that's why they're there. You can't sit back and, that's the other thing. You want people to speak up, not too much, but you don't want them to sit back and not say anything. Why are they there then?
So, and this is good to highlight the central role of the chair here. But now to bring us back a little bit to our topic, where somebody joins the board, and obviously they're not going to start as a chair, but they're thinking about their first step onto the board. What would you think is the right time, if there is such a thing, in one's career, to start thinking about a director role? And is there, if you will, a starter role? Should somebody who's really interested in board work start with a not-for-profit, or you mentioned a Crown Corporation today before, or there are other public purpose kind of boards. So what are your thoughts there to get a director career going, so to speak? And when would be the right or a good time to do that?
In terms of the right time, I think any time is the right time. Again, we all have some available time to give to other organizations. I think you just have to limit it to your own personal circumstances. If you're raising a young family, or you're just starting a new job, you have to be practical about these things. But I don't want to distinguish the importance, or I don't want to downplay the importance of the not-for-profit sector versus the profit. But there's a lot of competition for corporate boards today because they're paid. And it's difficult for someone to break into that. We like to say it's based on your skill and things like that, but there a lot of it is still who your network is. Who do you know? Those opportunities often come from other people who know you. But my advice to people starting out is to, again, target something that you're passionate about. So I started my director career in the not-for-profit sector. It was in the sport. I was a rugby player at the time. I club and pretty minor at the time, I thought, but once you get involved, there's a lot of issues that can come up. So what I did, I got involved in a not-for-profit there, and that led to opportunities at the provincial level and then at the federal level as well with different organizations. What I counsel my students to do, the executive MBA students, typically in their early 30s, is to contact an organization that they do have a passion for and offer to assist them on a committee. It's a lot less, the organization is making a lot less of a commitment to having you on the committee. What it does is it gives them an opportunity to sort of test drive you. Are you interested in the organization? Or do you have a passion for this? Are you conciliatory? Do you get along with other people? Do you add value to the committee meetings? And what we call it is evergreening. What the board is doing is they're developing a potential pool of candidates for the board. From an individual point of view, it gives you an opportunity to test the waters. Is this something that I'd like to get more involved in? And as I said, many organizations are looking for volunteers, particularly those with skill sets that they would deem appropriate for their board. So starting off on a committee and then working your way up into that organization's board. And as I said, there's term limits, things like that. You can't stay forever, but oftentimes there'll be other related organizations, either at after the local organization, maybe a provincial or a national organization, that you can get involved in as you're more interested, you become more knowledgeable about the organization and the ability to give back as well. So starting off small and working your way up.
Yeah, so Rick, I think that's excellent advice. And I want to again highlight something you said when you started your comments, that especially when we're talking on for-profit boards, paid boards, it is very competitive. There is a lot of people who are interested in that. And then also the aspect of networking, right? and actively networking. And maybe on that point, I recently spoke with a first-time director, somebody who had joined a for-profit board at the first time. And so this person's strategy had been to really hone in on their specific industry experience and skill set. And then he actually went out and looked within that industry and even actively approached some organizations. And so that was a successful strategy for that person. And just want to get your point, your viewpoint on that, is that, if I really want to do this, and maybe a bit further in my career, where even some people are saying, "Hey, I'm finished kind of my corporate career. I'm now looking to transition," and then being quite active in understanding the value proposition that you can bring in a specific sector, and then networking and reaching out. Is that something you have seen successful, or is it really you wait until the phone rings, so to speak, or you get an email and you get an invitation?
No, Dirk, I think you do have to be much more active. If it's something that you want, you have to go for it. And there are different ways of doing that. You mentioned your network, going to corporate events, talks, things like that, expanding your network. Now, obviously, I'm very involved with the Directors Education Program and the ICD. One of the ICD, as a member organization, has a number of events that bring like-minded people together. They also have a matching service where you can register your resume and the areas that you'd be interested in. Over 400 matches per year. So I'm an organization that's looking for a director. These are the skill sets I'm looking. There may be aspects of geography, gender, other aspects of diversity that I'm looking for. Those can all be put into the application, submitted to the ICD, and they do a search through their catalog. I can't think of the right word right now, but the catalog of directors that they have, and provide the organization with a confidential list of candidates. So you have to be, so joining the ICD gives you access to that. There's a couple of other organizations out there that do similar functions, but I believe the ICD is the largest one. If you have had a good corporate career, often the thing to get involved or give one of the search companies a call. Organizations use search companies as well. So getting to know somebody at the search company, so when they get a call, they're thinking, oh, Dirk Slim has those skill sets. you should give him a call. So they're always looking for potential candidates because it's in their best interest to do so. By presenting a candidate, if they're successful, they get a finder's fee. So it's you have to be I wouldn't say aggressive, but it has to be a targeted approach. You can't just sit back and wait up for the phone to ring, because it won't ring. There's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of competition for these. The average salary for a corporate director, publicly traded company in Canada last year was over $200,000. So that's a meaningful wage for the amount of time that you're receiving, but they're paying for your expertise and your commitment to that organization.
Yeah, Rick, and here, as our listeners know, on the Genoir Leadership Podcast, we like to keep things very practical, and so I think we just Rick, got some very practical advice from you there. But we know that you are the national director of the Directors Education Program. You just mentioned it. Maybe this is a good time to give the opportunity for a bit of a plug here, because I think it has been a fantastic and very, very, very successful program. So maybe for people who are interested in boards and are considering the Directors Education Program, maybe you can provide a few highlights to maybe whet people's appetites here a little bit.
Thanks, Dirk. I know that the ICD and Rotman will certainly appreciate this. We actually have two programs. So we have a 2-day, what we call Governance Essentials program, and that's for starters, for people who just want to get involved in governance, have not been involved before, but have heard about it. It goes through the basics. It's 2 days. I think it's a well spent, but really is an introduction to being a director. The Directors Education Program, which we spoke about, that's a 12-day program, 4 3-day modules spread over about 6 to 7 months, depending. We take July and August off, so if you start in May or June, you're not going to finish until the fall, so perhaps a little bit longer. But it really does a deep dive, and as you mentioned, it's the gold standard. We're very proud of it. A deep dive on a number of different areas. Dirk, you've taught in the program, and your topic, dealing with difficult conversations in the boardroom. One of the highlights of the program, I think. But there are a lot of highlights, and we've been very fortunate in attracting people like you to the program. And to my great amazement and wonderment and great appreciation, appreciation. We are so happy that you're still involved with the program. So, as you mentioned, Christian, as you mentioned earlier on, David Beatty, the founder of the program, still teaching in the program and adds tremendous value. I think he has to be one, if not the most experienced director in Canada. And we've been able to bring a number of different groups, the accounting firms, KPMG, PwC, compensation firm, Hugeson, Carol Hansel, Estelle Metier. The list goes on. And, it's the program is really a result of the efforts of a number of people, primarily our instructors and the people that the program attracts. It's a wonderful, excellent way to expand your network as well, because you're sitting there with like-minded people. There's lots of opportunity to engage with them. And, as I said, we're coming up to our 20th year. As Christian mentioned, over 7,300 people have gone and received the ICD.D designation. I'm not in a position to say that boards require a designation at this point, but I can tell you from my own experience and speaking with boards and search companies that if you have the ICD designation or another designation, there's a couple out there, it really does go a long way in helping you get on a board. They know that you're starting, you can start with a running start. They don't have to train you. You've had the proper training. You just have to get to know the organization and how your skill sets can help them.
Yeah. So Rick, thank you for that. And again, my experience, it's been a fantastic program. So thanks for telling us a little bit more about it right now. Rick, you've been around. You've been around directors. You've been around boards. You've been around companies, and so I want to let you go here to say, look, we have some questions for you, but let me call it a bit of a free-for-all question here. So on all of your insights, based on all your insights and experience, so what would be your crystallized, let's call it, advice here, as you're saying, and even maybe re-emphasize something you said before, but what would you like the things to be the things that our listeners really remember from this conversation? What would be the top 3 things you must know from from Rick. What would those be?
One would be that it is not a hobby. That if you're going to get involved in a board, it's a serious commitment. So committing to the time, attending the meetings, obviously doing the homework that's necessary to be effective. Understand that it's going to take some time. So that's the first thing. That it's not a hobby. This is a job, and it must be taken seriously in order to be effective. Two, I think that understand that you just don't join any board. You have to have a passion or an interest in something, and we all have interests. It might be in the SPCA, it might be in in one of the medical-based foundations. It could be in education. There's so many different areas where your skill set can be so helpful to organizations, and it's an opportunity to give back. So, I'm obviously talking about more of the corporate boards, the more not-for-profit boards there. On the corporate side, it's just as important, if not more so, and because of the potential for liability. And I should have mentioned that earlier, Dirk. The liability for a director is the very same whether you're sitting on a public, private, not-for-profit, crown, whatever type of board. So you have to make sure that you're properly protected. No one has ever asked you to put your personal assets at risk to sit on a board. And there are ways to protect yourself with indemnities from the organization, proper insurance in place. I say something like that and people get discouraged. Well, there's liability. Why would I put my name forward for something like that? Well, because it's important to give back. It's important to get involved. And there are very practical, reasonable, and ways to protect yourself. And the first one is just do your job as a board member. Your due diligence defense is the first defense that a director can count on. So I guess understand the commitment that you're making, understand it's not a hobby, it's a job, and understand that you have a tremendous opportunity to make it to an organization, a society, a business environment where you can play a pivotal role in guiding that organization forward.
So Rick, and thank you so much for adding that last point. So I'm so glad I asked that free-for-all question that you could add a little bit more there. But I think I'm looking at Christian. It looks like we're coming up to the end of our time here. So maybe Christian, I give it back to you here for the last piece.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dirk, and thank you, Rick. That was a fantastic conversation. I certainly have a lot of notes here, and as I'm sitting on a board myself for the first time on a advisory committee and being in those board meetings, I've certainly learned a lot that is very practical, and I will apply at those board meetings. And I'm seeing how that relates to everything you discussed, where the time commitment is serious. It's not a hobby, and you have to balance those things. So that was great to hear, where understanding what you're getting into, doing the homework, being prepared, and understanding the difference between the oversight role and getting into operations, that was very helpful. And Rick, as you develop that into what exactly are we doing there? How do I just be an effective board member, doing the homework? And at the board I sit on, they still print out the sheets. So actually reading through those and being prepared and actually listening well, that was critical, where oftentimes you might get called on to say something and you don't want to just repeat people. You want to show you're listening well. And when it gets to you, be an effective communicator. So that was another great point that I think is very practical. And those final conversations about how to get into a board, where in this case, I could say I was called up and asked, and that worked out. But for a lot of other boards, especially those competitive corporate positions where there's the salary along with that, being active and networking. And you mentioned a number of things I wrote down here to make sure to be aware of: going to events, matching services, searching companies. Those are all viable strategies to get those positions. So Rick, that was a fantastic, very practical discussion. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and experience with us. And Dirk, I'll just ask you, is there anything you think I missed there? I think that was an attempt to cover it all, but if people missed anything, they could always listen back and listen to this again and again.
No, I think that was a fantastic. And so, hey, Rick, last words from you.
I just want to say thank you. This is an important service you're providing for people, and to be listed with the likes of someone like David Beatty, I'm very proud of it. So, as I said, we've had a wonderful friendship, and let's continue. So, thank you very much. Good luck with your work as well.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. That's been our episode with Rick Powers, we hope that you enjoyed and that you'll join us again in 2 weeks when we continue the series. Take care.